Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm Mike Johnson. I'm the Vice Chairman of the House Republican Conference, and I'll kick things off. It's crystal clear at this point. The Biden White House is maybe distracted, maybe they're misguided, but they remain focused on the wrong things. They're trying to control the narrative instead of solving problems, and the American people have had just about enough of it. Of course, this week they're at it again. This time, the spin is already starting about ahead of tomorrow's GDP numbers for the second quarter. We all expect, we know what's going to happen. It's going to be another disastrous economic report, and the ongoing series of disastrous economic reports that have happened under this administration. Of course, many expect that the update tomorrow will confirm what we seem to feel and know intuitively, that we've officially entered a recession. And instead of working to keep our economy out of recession, the White House is busying itself trying to redefine what that term means. Of course, we know what recession means. It's no less ambiguous than what a man and a woman is. But again, they're spinning it. Regardless of all that, we know the economy is clearly contracting. We feel that acutely. American families everywhere are seeing it and feeling it for themselves. We've done town halls in our district over the last several weeks as we've been back and forth from Washington, and that's the feeling, that's the complaint of people all across this country. In the face of the looming economic recession and the crushing inflation, what are the Democrats on this side of Pennsylvania Avenue focused on? Well, they're taking guns from law-abiding citizens, they're dishing out more corporate welfare, and yet another tax and spend reconciliation bill. The Democrat agenda alternates between attempts to distract the American people at best and outright misguided policy at worst. So we're here today to say that this election will be about three things, and this is what I derive from my town halls, what we call it the three I's. It's inflation, immigration, and incompetence. Soaring inflation, uninhibited illegal immigration that is a serious threat to the country, and staggering incompetence on every level. There was a CNN story last week that caught my eye. It was entitled, "Vulnerable Democrats Sound the Alarm Over Inflation Crisis." Well, it's a little late for that. We really wish that they had thought about that before they voted to pass $5.4 trillion in new partisan spending last year. And now that the bill's coming due for all of that, those vulnerable Democrats are hoping the American people will just forget their vote, but we don't intend to let that happen. House Republicans are so looking forward to the upcoming August recess, our district work period. We're going to go out there and take our vision for a new direction for the country directly to the American people. And we met and talked about that as a big group this morning. I thank everybody for being here today, and I want to yield first to my dear friend, Representative Carol Miller from the great state of West Virginia.
Thank you so much, and good morning. Sadly, we're here today because the Democrats are more concerned with the definition of the word recession. They seem to struggle with definitions. They're more concerned with that than the looming recession. And for Democrats in Washington, they like to play the word game, and it's being played with the media. But in West Virginia, the recession is very real. Real people are being really hurt because of failed liberal policies. Inflation is over 9%. Gasoline is over $4 a gallon. Our economy is shrinking, and the DC Democrats just keep spending and spending more and more money. If we see a second quarter of contracting in tomorrow's economic data, you would hope that the Democrats and the Biden administration would actually admit that we're in a recession. If they deny it, people in West Virginia and across America will continue to suffer. When it comes to recession, the Democrats aren't in touch with reality. They seem to care more about fixing Biden's plummeting approval ratings than they do about an economic plan. America are feeling this through and through. I urge them to stop with the games, accept reality, and join with the Republicans to solve the problems. Open up our energy resources now. I yield to my good friend, Congressman Wenstrup.
Thank you all, and thank you all for being here. You know, as a physician, I was excited when I heard Senator Joe Manchin say that he was interested in talking about lowering drug costs and lowering drug prices. But there's unfortunately one way to do that, and that's to stop making drugs. And that's the problem with the bill that is at hand and part of Build Back Better. is it's going to limit production. That's what the Democrat bill does. And it's a crushing blow to research and development in the pharmaceutical industry. They estimate that there'll be about 40% fewer drugs going into the future than we normally would have. And, if you're suffering from a chronic disease and you're waiting for a cure, with this bill, you can pretty much forget it. If you are someone who's living with HIV and this bill was in place 40 years ago, you probably would be dead because there wouldn't be the development of cures and treatments. If you are someone who had hepatitis C, you now have a cure. You now have a cure, no longer a need for a liver transplant, hospitalizations over and over again, waiting for that transplant. But if this bill was in place 10 years ago, we probably would not have that cure. I treated a lot of patients with severe rheumatoid arthritis. I had to do very heavy reconstructive surgeries because of their deformities. Those are gone today. You rarely see them anymore because of the biologics that have been produced. With this bill, you likely would never see that cure. And to me, one lost cure is too many. And one of the worst parts about this bill, if you're someone, like most Americans, that pays into Medicare your whole life, this bill is robbing Medicare to go ahead and pay for insurance premiums. The money that is saved is going to insurance companies, not even targeted for care. We have a solution, H.R. 19. It's been out there for a while. It's bipartisan. It has many facets to it. It lowers costs, increases transparency, decreases out-of-pocket costs for seniors. It can spread out the costs for something that's expensive. And also, there's site neutrality. You're going to pay the same no matter where your treatment occurs. And you're going to know what that cost is in advance. So we have a lot to offer, and we are going to be pushing those things out. But I hope that we don't have to deal with this drug bill that they're trying to pass today. And with that, I would like to yield to my friend from Louisiana, Whip Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Dr. Wenstrup and my colleagues. Unfortunately, later this week, economists are expecting that it will be confirmed that the United States is in a recession. We've seen the indicators for months now, families paying more for goods everywhere they go. If you go to the grocery store, you're paying 20, 30% more. Gasoline, of course, has more than doubled from what it was before Biden took office. And so you would think Joe Biden would be spending all of his time trying to figure out a plan to fix this crisis. But in fact, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing denial. And what you've seen the last week is President Biden spending more time trying to redefine what inflation and a recession is, rather than working to lay out a plan to stop us from going into a recession or to get us out of a recession. And the real simple answer is just by reversing so many of the failed policies that President Biden has put in place since he's taken office that have caused this recession. You can't redefine your way out of a recession. You've got to reverse the failed policies. But the first step to fixing any kind of crisis is to first admit the crisis, admit the problem that he's created, and he won't do it. Joe Biden won't look the American people in the eye and admit that his programs have failed. He won't admit that he has brought this country into a recession. Instead, he just wants to keep denying and try to redefine the term recession. American people know better. The American people know what caused these problems. They've seen the spending, the trillions of dollars in spending, paying people not to work, bailing out failed states, picking winners and losers, and then ultimately what you've seen on energy, literally attacking American energy while he flies off to foreign countries, begging them to produce the energy that we could be producing here a lot cleaner at lower costs, lower emissions, lowering gasoline prices. But Joe Biden won't do that. In fact, earlier this week, Joe Biden sent some of his minions here to Congress trying to get House Democrats to go brag about how low gas prices are. Can you believe how out of touch Joe Biden is as president, that he's trying to get Democrats in Congress to brag that gas prices are low? Everybody knows how high gas prices are and that they're double what they were the day that he took office and started an assault on American energy. Now, if Nancy Pelosi wanted to work with us to solve the problem, there are a lot of offers we've put on the table to lower gas prices. But as you can see this week, like we've seen week after week, Democrats have no plan to solve any of these problems. They don't have any plan to solve the inflation crisis. Democrats have no plan to solve gasoline crisis. Democrats have no plan to solve the border crisis. They just want to keep spending. They just want to keep going down this far left radical road that has caused all of these problems. The good news is, over this August recess, you're going to see Republicans fanning out all across the country talking about our commitment to America, what we would do to lay out a plan that would solve these crises that Joe Biden and Speaker Pelosi have created. We're going to lay out a plan for how to get inflation under control. We're going to be laying out our plan for how to lower gas prices, for how to secure America's border, for how to put parents in charge of their kids' education again, so that we can actually have the ability for parents to pull back the veil, as we saw during COVID, for so many of the things that were going wrong in schools when union bosses were sided with over kids. That's what we're going to be talking about during this August recess. And I think you're going to see more of a hunger than ever before for those bold conservative policies that would solve these problems in the face of Democrats from President Biden to Speaker Pelosi on down, who have no plan to fix the crises that they've created. With that, we'd be happy to take some questions.
What is the Republican plan to combat inflation? What specific bills would Republicans put on the floor in the House?
You're going to see the details rolled out over the summer and probably by the beginning of September as you really see the true debate starting around the country over the choices. We still have a lot of primaries out there, so we've got candidates that are running and want to run on this agenda. But we've had these task forces over the last few months where we've been laying out the plans to lower inflation, to get spending under control, to lower gas prices, to secure America's border. And frankly, the good news is you don't have to reinvent the wheel to fix these problems. You go look 2 years ago, we actually had a secure border. We had lower gas prices. Most families were paying less than $2 a gallon at the pump just 2 years ago. And it wasn't magic that was creating it. It was good, smart energy policy where we allowed American energy to dominate the world markets, and Joe Biden shut that down day one, killing Keystone Pipeline. No new permits, no new pipelines, no ability for us to produce in so many parts of the country. And again, it's not because he's against oil or he's against pipelines. He greenlighted Putin's pipeline. He's begging Saudi Arabia after he already begged Putin to produce more oil. Stop begging dictators to do it. We've got the resources here. So we're going to be rolling all of it out. You know, you've seen parts of it already over the last few months, but we're going to formalize it. And then by September, we're going to have a formal commitment to America, similar to what people saw in 1994 with the Contract to America. Yeah.
Will Republicans be backing any of these police or public safety bills that are coming out of the Rules Committee and getting a vote this week?
We've got to take a look because some of the bills are still being developed. As you can see, the Democrats don't have the votes for any of the bills. There's some real concerning components. They have one bill that defunds the police yet again at a time when crime is out of control, where they literally take grants away from cops and say, in lieu of giving it to cops, you've got to give it to people like social workers. So if somebody calls 911 because somebody with mental health problems is trying to kill somebody, that victim doesn't want a mental health counselor. They want a cop to show up. And yet in one of the bills, they defund the police by taking that money away from cops. When will Democrats get the message that people want safe communities? They don't want defunding of the police, yet Democrats here in Washington still want to go after cops, still want to defund police, still want to encourage cashless bail, where a candidate for governor of New York, who is a House colleague of ours, Lee Zeldin, can have his life threatened, and within 6 hours, the guy's released without a dime of bail being paid. That's what people are outraged about. And if the Democrats keep going down that road, you're going to see strong rejection here. If they want to support cops, we're there with them. And we've been encouraging Democrats to reject their defund the police mantra. We haven't seen the final language on any of it because, again, Democrats don't have the votes yet for any of these bills. I'm concerned that the far left keeps driving these bills further and further away from where the mainstream of America is. So we'll see what happens when these bills come to the floor, but they've got any language that defunds the police, we're going to be very vocal in opposition. Yeah.
Scalise, just wanted to get your reaction on the Democrats introduced a bill requiring 18-year term limits for U.S. Supreme Court justices. Your reaction to this, and is it almost like they're wanting to change the rules now that they're not getting
Yeah, it's interesting when the Democrats get their way on rulings, they're happy with the Supreme Court. When they don't get their way, they want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to change the Supreme Court. They want to go violate federal law by protesting at the homes of Supreme Court justices. At the end of the day, I think this attack on institutions that they don't agree with politically, it's wearing on people. People are tired of just every day they wake up and they're angry at somebody. I mean, look, they've got the House, they've got the Senate, they've got the White House, and yet every day they wake up angry trying to blame somebody else for the problems they've created. So, they ought to focus with working with us Republicans on fixing the problems they've created instead of continuing to go out and attack other people. Yeah, right here.
Questions. The US
Last two questions. How about that?
Thank you. Regarding Speaker Pelosi's potential trip to Taiwan, the U.S. military said it would utilize fighter ships and surveillance assets to provide overlapping rings of protection for her potential flight to Taiwan. But is a trip to Taiwan right now worth sparking an international incident?
Well, why would it be an international incident for the Speaker of the House or anybody tied to the United States government to go and show support for an ally of ours? And Taiwan is. I mean, we've seen the threats that are posed, just like we see what's happening in Ukraine. But in tough times, it's when you need to be standing with your friends and your allies around the world. And if there are bullies around the world that are intimidated by that and they try to threaten or intimidate you from doing it, that's when you need to be standing up to the bullies around the world as well. And our friends and our allies are watching this real closely, because if they see the bad guys able to threaten the United States of America, that means no country is safe from tyranny.
And lastly,
Yeah.
this is my second question. President Trump, in his speech on Tuesday, described America as a war zone. Is America a war zone?
Well, what President Trump talked about, I was there at the speech, he talked about very specific problems in a lot of big cities around the country where crime is out of control. I mean, you're seeing upticks in violent crime through the roof. Some cities are seeing doubling of their murder rates because they defunded the police, because they won't put bad guys in jail. When somebody's arrested for a violent crime and they're released within hours of the crime without even a dime of bail, it creates even more unrest. It encourages that kind of behavior. You saw the cop in New York getting beaten up by a guy who had been released from prison before, and then within hours of beating up a cop is released again. This is what's infuriating people all around the country. And we're going to be standing up for rule of law. If we get the majority back, you're going to see us standing with law enforcement and standing up against criminals who are taking over some of these cities to the point where people are fleeing in droves. Go look at the numbers of people who are fleeing big cities. The Chicago Bears just moved out of Chicago. I don't blame them. But you look at all the people that have moved out of New York to go to states like Florida. People are moving with their feet because they're seeing that certain communities won't provide basic security to protect people from safety and their families. Everybody deserves to be safe in their communities. And when they're not, they're making decisions to leave those places. We can't let that happen across the board with America. So appreciate it. We'll see y'all on the floor.
Thank you.